Hey guys, I hope you had a good half term. The project we're going to be doing today is the data and PVC trunking installation. Make sure your paperwork's up to date. For all of the videos we've done so far, you will need it for the project to be signed off at the end. The materials list and tools list etc. is quite small for this project, so just fill it in as we're going along. This is what the project is going to look like in the end. We're going to start off with that bottom piece that's 300mm long. Right, I'm going to start with the easiest piece, which is the bottom section, which is 300mm long, 30cm. So I'm just going to mark it off at that. Make sure you put your 45-degree angle on the right side. As the two pieces of trunking are going to be going together like this, I know that my angle needs to be going like that. As you can see, these two pieces aren't going to go together, so we need to swap the angle over on this side so that the two overlap. These two pieces can now join together. This piece is also going to be 300mm long. This side of the trunking is going to use a prefabricated bend, so the overall length of this piece of trunking needs to be shorter. It needs to be trimmed down to this point here so that the cables can come around the bend. So I'm going to put my prefabricated bend on my 300 line and trim the trunking back so that only a section that fits into this part here is left. The trunking clicks into this part here of the bend, so I need to remove the lid from the trunking so that it'll fit in. So once again I'm going to line up my bend, make sure it's at 300. Which is there. I'm going to mark where these catches are inside of the prefabricated bend, which is here. So I'm going to remove the trunking lid and trim off the end of the trunking so that the prefabricated bend can clip on. So when the lid goes back onto the trunking, there's a small piece at the end with a prefabricated bend to click onto. Now it's time for our last piece of trunking, which is going to come off here. This piece of trunking is going to be 400mm from the centre of the box that's being installed into. So I'm going to put the box at the end of the trunking and I'm going to measure from the centre 400mm. Once again, the prefabricated bend's going to be installed, so I'm going to trim it back to the end of these catches, and I'm going to remove some of the lid so that it can be clipped on. So I'm going to cut the trunk in here and remove the lid here. And I'm going to trim the lid down as before. Put that back onto there. All the pieces will now fit together. Install your box anywhere you choose, as long as there's enough room for your trunking. Make sure you use pan-headed screws so that the trunking sits flush with the wall. I'm going to measure up how much cable I need. Make sure you leave enough at both ends to be terminated. So I'm going to cut a piece that's 1200mm. As you can see, there's a small gap here. I'm going to gently file away at this until the two pieces butt up to each other. In the interest in keeping the videos as short as possible for you, I don't go through all of the stages of making these projects. A lot of time is spent perfecting each individual piece of the project. So don't be disheartened if you put your work on the wall and it's not quite right. My projects aren't perfect every time. There's many occasions where I have to take it back off the wall, put it back in the vise and adjust it or cut it or file. I'm going to strip off about 40mm of this outer insulation. There's a stripping tool built into these crimpers. You slide it into the cutting tool. Rotate the cutting tool back and forth, then wiggle the wire backwards and forwards and pull off the outer insulation. This can also be achieved with the previous method of using snips down the middle and then using the draw wire to strip back the outer insulation. Do whatever's easiest for you. Once again, you're going to have something that looks like this. This will need to be straightened out so it looks like this. Generally speaking, only 2 of the 4 pairs are ever used, the orange and the green. Generally speaking, these are used to transmit and receive data. Both have a positive and a negative. The striped wire is the positive and the solid core is the negative. When both connectors are used in the B configuration, it's a straight through connector. However, a crossover cable may be installed by terminating one end using the B configuration and the other end using the A configuration. These crossover cables aren't used very often anymore, as generally the systems that would need them can do this function internally. The blues and the browns can be used to transmit power. This is called PoE, Power over Ethernet. Some devices, such as CCTV, can utilise the blues and the browns to power the cameras up rather than getting a power source locally or running separate power lines to the device. By utilising both the solid and striped colours, it's possible to get 100 watts of power at 50 volts. To get power into the Ethernet cable, a device called an injector is used. It's installed in line of the Cat5 cable. Some Ethernet switches and routers have an injector built in. Okay, on to the last step, which is putting the RJ45 on the end of this cable. Now unfortunately we didn't have the stock at college to do this, so I'm back at home and I'm going to show you how to do this now. So I'm just going to strip off this end of the cable and then I'll show you how to crimp this RJ45. Okay, so I'm going to unravel these pairs, get them nice and straight as we did before. Okay, and there's a certain order that these need to be in. So I'm just going to hold on to the base of these wires with my finger and my thumb. And the combination, starting from the left to the right, is orange and white, orange, green and white, there we go, green and white, blue, blue and white, green, brown and white, brown. So you want to just order them inside of your finger and your thumb like that. You want to bunch them all together, so just grab them, get them nice and straight and together like this. So just wiggle them around, it just straightens the wires and gets them nice and tight and close to each other. So end up with something like that. Then I'm going to use the cutting tool on this crimping tool, so the cutting edge, which is here. I'm going to slide my wires in there and I'm going to trim them down. End up with something like this. So I'll show you the back end. Here we go. So this crimp goes on a particular way. There's a clip on the back, I don't know if you can see that, there it is. That clip needs to face down, okay, facing away from you. You're going to slide these wires inside of the crimp. Now this can be a little bit fiddly, but it is aided by a narrow channel that funnels the wires into the correct positions. But there's 8 little, let's say, channels, and there's 8 wires. You just want to make sure that each one of those wires is going to a separate channel, and of course keeping in order. So I've got mine in there, just going to make sure the order's still right, so I can see through this little window at the bottom. It's orange and white orange, green and white blue, blue and white green, brown and white brown. So the order's still good. You want to make sure that the wires are pushed up right to the end of the crimp. It might be a little bit hard to see this on the camera. Yeah, you can't really see, but you'll be able to see it by eye. The wires should be touching the back of the crimp, okay? If they're not touching the back, when you crimp the pins down, which are these little copper things here, when you crimp them down it'll miss the wire and there won't be any continuity. So once you've done that, you're going to slide it into the crimping tool. The crimping tool's got these teeth here. Oh, if you can see, there we go. We've got these teeth on the back. Those teeth need to push down on those pins. So you slide the crimp through the tool, okay, so it pokes out the other side, and then those teeth push down on the pins. So squeeze it as hard as possible. There we go, and release. Take it out, and now that cable is fixed into the crimp. The last thing to do is to test the continuity, which we'll show you how to do when you're in college. Thanks for watching. Make sure you've got all those notes down and you fill in the paperwork from the previous videos in preparation for going back to college on the 8th.